Welcome to the Arrington Gavin Show. Real talk, big opinions, and fearless conversations. From the front lines of politics to the latest in pop culture. From breaking sports headlines to the stories that move the world. Nothing's off limits, and nobody's holding back. Arrington Gavin is here to break it down, build it up, and keep it all the way real. So turn it up, lean in, and let's get into it. This is the Arrington Gavin Show.
Hey, family. Welcome to the Arrington Gavin Show, your go-to spot for sharp insights, bold opinions, and unfiltered takes on the biggest stories of the day, whether it is politics, sports, pop culture, or the latest buzz. Look, we're diving deep and keeping it real, so please do me a favor. Kick back, stay informed, and get ready to join the conversation. My friends, you're in for a treat as always. I bring on amazing guests, great conversation, nothing new here. I'm honored to have on attorney David Mick. He is the Republican nominee candidate for Chesapeake Commonwealth attorney. As you know, I am a proud Chesapeake resident. Shout out, y'all, for any of those who familiar about the Hampton Roads area or from Chesapeake. You know how much I love my city, and we have big elections. It's obviously, you see, I'm rocking, for those who are watching right now, I'm rocking my I voted sticker because early vote has started here for us. Today, you're probably having early voting currently happening in your area, or maybe coming up very shortly, because we have big elections happening across this nation. So yeah, we have David Mick, who is running for Commonwealth attorney for the city of Chesapeake, and I'm excited, man. I'm excited because we have some very impactful elections happening in the 7 cities here in Hampton Roads. And if y'all don't recall, I've had on the incumbent Chesapeake Commonwealth attorney, current Chesapeake Commonwealth attorney Matt Hamill on, and we had a very great conversation. But in that conversation, attorney Hamill had made some allegations about his opponent, Mr. David Mick, who, as I mentioned, is our guest for this evening. So I'm excited to have him on so he can speak from his side about this, and really just, his platform, why he's running, what does he hope for the city of Chesapeake, and so much more. What got him involved in law, really. And so we're excited to have him on. And so like I said, you're in for a treat. So before we move forward, as always, family, thank you so much for taking 1 hour of your time to tune in to yet another great episode of the Arrington Gavin Show. For those who happen to be watching us right now on our YouTube channel, do me a favor, like, subscribe, share with a friend, share with family. We want to keep those numbers going. We want to grow our subscribers as well as viewerships, because we want to continue to put out great conversation, great information, and hopefully you can learn something, because our 3 words is fun, opinionated, because hell, I have an opinion for everything. Hey, don't judge me, but also being informed. And it's important that we all stay informed and have an understanding of what goes on in our backyard. We see what happens in Washington, but guess what happens in Washington trickles down on a state level, which will eventually trickle down on a local level. So it's important for you all to know exactly who serves on your school board, who serves as your city treasurer, who serves your commissioner of revenue, who serves as your Commonwealth attorney. I mean, the list goes on and on of so many positions that you all should be aware of, especially if you're a taxpayer. You definitely got to know who these folks are in office, because I've been guilty of sharing my thoughts, kind of, I wouldn't say sticking it to our elected officials, but hey, that's what they signed up for. They didn't sign up to have just an easy job and nobody to keep them accountable, because it's important that we got to keep our elected officials accountable. And like I said, I have a lot of mouth, so if I see something I don't like, I'm gonna say something. If I see something I do like, I will acknowledge it, regardless of side of the aisle. That's one thing I'm a big proponent on, is, hey, give credit where credit's due, and if someone does something bad, hey, you got to say something. So yes, YouTube as well. You can stream us on Goatverse TV. So if you have not downloaded the Goatverse TV app yet, please do so. It's available on the App Store, Google Play Store, Roku, as well as Amazon Fire TV. You can catch some past episodes of the Arrington Gavin Show on demand on Goatverse TV. And then if you prefer to listen to us audio only, guess what? You can do so. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on all major podcast platforms. In addition to that, you can listen to us on the radio airwaves. You probably listen to us right now in New Orleans by way of WBOK 1230 AM. What New Orleans is talking about. You can tune into the Arrington Gavin Show weeknights at 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, that's only on WBOK 1230 AM. What New Orleans is talking about. And then we're going to move it on to the Metro Atlanta region to WDJY 99.1 FM Straight Talk. Weeknights, you can tune into the Arrington Gavin Show at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is only on WDJY 99.1 FM. All right, family. Now that I've said all that, before we head to a commercial break, we want to bring up a fun fact about our guest, Mr. David Mick. And so when I had the opportunity to talk with David, and here's a cool part, because again, I told you it's early voting happening around in our community, and so I do my part. I'm an advocate. I always love going to early voting, just because, hey, I like to get it in and out, get it out the way. And so I had the opportunity of running into David Mick. So it was great, because I haven't had the chance to meet him. Real solid dude. And so we get to talking. And then before we came on this program, he has shared some fun facts about him. And what little did you guys know? You probably didn't. This man is an avid marathon runner. Now you're like, okay, that's great. Who doesn't want to, run? That's some of the best exercise. And, I always say it all the time. You have to take care of your temple, not just externally, but internally. So he is a regular runner, and he competed. He competed in not one, not two, but I want to say seven marathon races. Two of those races were the Boston Marathon, the Mecca, the Boston Marathon. Marathon. Do you know how many miles that is? Yeah, more than my fingers here. More than my fingers. I can't look. I'm good for 1 mile, maybe 2, down and back. That's it. Because when you get to running and your throat start burning, like my throat's dry. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. And then he just said, let me go on a run, maybe a run and walk, or maybe like a light jog. And yeah, I'm an elliptical guy, and that's my bread and butter. I work smarter, not harder, guys. I work smarter, not harder. So I will stick with my elliptical and wait and call it Christmas. The marathon, I'll leave it to David Mick. All right. But y'all don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Arrington Gavin Show. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
Every man has a story to tell. Your ambitions, your achievements, your legacy. Your suit should reflect that story, crafted precisely, designed for impact, and tailored exclusively for you. We work with only the finest fabrics, luxurious wools, silk, linen, and blends from world-renowned mills in Italy, the UK, and India. These fabrics are the foundation of custom suits that exude elegance and stand the test of time. But a suit isn't just about fabric, it's about fit, and it's about confidence, and it all starts with you. When you work with me, you'll receive a personalized consultation, whether in person or over Zoom. Together, we'll explore your vision and discuss your needs, and we're gonna bring your ideas to life. My journey as a designer includes apprenticing under New York-based designer Clavon Leonard, showcasing collections at New York Fashion Week, Algeria Fashion Week, and the prestigious Baltimore Met Gala. That experience is what we bring to every suit we create. From weddings to corporate events and everything in between, we specialize in crafting one-of-a-kind suits for life's most significant moments. Dapper Luke has been recognized as one of Baltimore's best menswear in 2023, and I was honored to be one of the 10 designers selected for the prestigious Baltimore Met Gala. With over 900 satisfied clients, we proudly serve Virginia Beach and Baltimore, bringing world-class designs to these incredible communities. We don't just make suits, we craft confidence. Your suit will fit your body, your style, and it will tell your story. Book your free online personal consultation today. Visit www.dapperluke.com.
Become a man of distinction with Rugged Evolution Beard Care. Order our scented beard oils and beard balms to help you maintain and grow the perfect beard. Order today. Try our men's care products like the full body exfoliating cleansing bars, body wash, smooth stash, and more. Log on to our website or download our app to place your orders. Rugged Evolution Beard Care. We're your luxury but affordable men's care line. And remember,
rugged is the new smooth.
And we still in traffic.
I don't look familiar, do I? Not in this seat.
Hey, what's that you listening to?
Here to host today on the
Hey, turn it up.
Yeah, this that new Goat Verse app. I got you.
So y'all want to know where the goats are? They're off on the sidelines.
Looking for fresh, relevant content wherever you go?
What was the name of that he said?
Introducing GoatVerse TV,
Goat Verse, that's what it's called.
the free streaming app that brings you the best podcasts, current events, and thought-provoking opinions all in one place. Download it now from the Apple Store or Play Store. In Goats, we trust.
All right, family. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Arrington Gavin Show. I'm your host, your friend Arrington Gavin. As I mentioned earlier, we have a special guest this evening. Without further ado, I'm gonna bring on attorney David Mick. He is the Republican candidate for Chesapeake Commonwealth attorney. Let me go ahead and bring on the man of the hour. David, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, my man. I can hear you loud and clear. Look, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out your busy schedule. I know, look, today is the start of early voting. So for those who are eventually going to be tuning into this, we happen to be recording this on the day of early voting, the start, which is a big deal, really, in Hampton Roads. I would say in the past election cycles, we've seen a growing amount of turnout, which is a good thing because that means people are getting out there to vote. We were talking not earlier today how like last year it was so packed. I mean, I had to park further down. I had to walk, man. I had to walk to go and then wait in a long line too. But hey, I knew it was my duty to do so. And then today was a quite large turnout. So I appreciate you taking the time to come here for a great conversation. For those who are unfamiliar with David Mick, as I mentioned earlier, we have listeners outside of the Hampton Roads area, and maybe those that are here in Chesapeake that might don't know too much about David Mick. If you don't mind sharing just a little bit about you.
So first, let me say it was early voting today, and as you can tell, it was a full Sunday because I got a little burnt on the face here. I was out there for quite a few hours. So yeah, but a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Hampton Roads. I grew up in Portsmouth, off Turnpike Road. Lived in the same house until I went off to college. Went to college at Christopher Newport in Newport News, so another Hampton Roads city. And then I went to law school at Widener University in Pennsylvania. And then I came back, and I always had an interest, kind of because how I grew up. I've growing up in Portsmouth, I had some people in my family who went to prison, and I've had drug use in my family, people overdosing and stuff. And I was just kind of always attracted to law, and I really wanted to do criminal law. So when I came back to Hampton Roads after law school, I took the bar exam, and I took a job at a small civil law firm, but I didn't like doing civil work. I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. So in February of 2008, I took a job at the public defender's office in Norfolk. And I worked there for many years, and I enjoyed being a public defender. I really appreciate the work that public defenders do. And I think it's important that we have good public defenders. I mean, that's the only way the justice system works. I mean, you just have to have it. But for me, I did that until 2014. And I just knew, for me and my background, my calling was to be a prosecutor. And one of the reasons why is because when you're a defense attorney, your duty is to your client. Now, obviously, you can't perpetrate a fraud in the court, but if you think your client needs substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment, but he doesn't want to do drug court, you can't really go in there and advocate for it because he doesn't want that, right? And just seeing so many things growing up, I just thought my background was going to make me a better prosecutor because I could have more buy-in and more say in what I thought was an appropriate sentence for somebody, like if it was drug court. Also, I wanted to do more outreach. And I wanted to be able to have a say in the prosecutor's office. I think we need to focus on proactive measures just as much as we focus on reactive measures, right? And I thought by being a prosecutor, I could have a say and have some influence on it in doing those proactive measures. So I did that. I was a deputy Commonwealth attorney in Chesapeake where I supervised a team of lawyers. I've tried every case you can think of, from simple misdemeanors to first-degree murder. I mean, I've argued successfully in criminal cases all the way up to the Supreme Court. After 2021, I went and joined the AG's office in January of 2022. And there I did criminal litigation. I did appellate work. I did special investigations. I did cold case assistance around the state, because some jurisdictions around the state, they just don't have the manpower to really dig back into these cold cases. And you really need experts in the criminal field to kind of help out with that. So I was on a small team that did that. We also did what I thought was probably the most fascinating things I did in the Attorney General's offices. I worked on writs of actual innocence, which is a very new kind of area of law. You know, there's not many Supreme Court cases, Virginia Supreme Court cases on it, but it was fascinating. And while I was there, you know, we joined in on 3 writs of actual innocence. One guy served 42 years in prison and he was innocent. And it shows you how important it is to have experienced prosecutors who do things the right thing, the right way, no matter what, because it prevents like that from happening, you know. And that's just a little bit about my background, you know, what my experience is. You know, I've tried every case you can think of. I've supervised people. I've been mentors to criminal lawyer, and that's just what I'm good at. You know, I'm also the chairman of the board of the Department of Juvenile Justice. So I was appointed by Governor Youngkin and unanimously approved by the General Assembly in 2022 to be on the board. And then just recently, I was elected to be the chairman of the board of the Department of Juvenile Justice. And we can talk more about that, about some of the things I've done there. But that's just a little bit of a background about me and what my experience is.
So after that, definitely qualified for, you know, for running for a Commonwealth attorney. But the you know, I guess a question will be, with hearing the success that you've had in your, you know, in your career so far, you know, why pursue Commonwealth attorney for the city of Chesapeake? Where did that idea, was that something that was always kind of, you know, in the background, that, hey, look, I think I would love to pursue this, you know, someday?
So growing up where I grew up, nobody thought they were going to be politicians or running for anything. You know, so no, I never thought I was going to run for office, and I really don't deem myself as a politician. You know, I haven't been on city council. You know, my opponent, he's the only elected Commonwealth attorney that I know of in the history of Chesapeake that's ever served in an elected position before. And I think he's the only one in Hampton Roads that's ever served in an elected position before. So this wasn't about politics for me. I'm running because I see what I think is not a good job being done there. And I think the reason why is because he hasn't been a state's prosecutor. He hasn't tried the murder cases. He hasn't had a full caseload in the state's prosecutor's office, knowing what it's like to deal with Axon video and discovery and all this and that. And I'm not saying he's a bad guy. He's a nice guy, you know, but what I equate it to is if you're having brain surgery, do you want your neighbor who's a nice enough guy, or do you want the brain surgeon? You know, you know, that's kind of what happened here. And, you know, there's some things that I see when I see stuff like murder convictions getting vacated for discovery violations. That's an issue for me. When I see things like, you know, a 40% conviction rate for assault and battery on law enforcement officers in 2024, that's an issue for me. When I see conviction rates of 4% for juveniles bringing weapons to school property, those are issues for me. When I see turnover in an office of 50 people, more than 40 people leaving in 3.5 years, that's an issue for me, because that causes so much backlog, that causes so many continuances that are unnecessary, and it leads to mistakes. And, you know, that's just issues that I see, and I attribute it to a lack of experience. What I attribute it to is a person who was a politician who parlayed it into this job. And I think we need to get a prosecutor back in that job. You know, I mean, that's why I'm running, because I think there are some issues there that are causing our city to be less safe, and I'm running because of that. You know, I'm not running because I just want to challenge him. I'm running for our city, you know, and I think if you're running against an incumbent, there has to be reasons. And those are some of my reasons. You know, we can get into more later. You know, I think we need to have more outreach. I don't think it's fair for Commonwealth attorneys, for people to meet their prosecutor after they get a subpoena. We should be part of the community. If the community elects us, we need to be a part of it. When I was in the Commonwealth attorney's office, I was very active in outreach. I'd go to South Norfolk twice a week. I'd hang out at the bus stop on Liberty Street, just talking to people, saying, hey, what's going on here? How do y'all feel? What's the deal here? And I think that's important. You know, we did Traveling the Road to Success, Boys and Girls Conferences, Summer Series. We were always active, basketball tournaments, because community outreach isn't campaigning. And that's what's frustrating to me, not being a politician, is seeing politicians brag about all the stuff they're doing 100 days out in an election. That's not outreach. That's campaigning. You're asking them to do something for you. I want you to do something for the community every day. And that's another thing I want to bring back. That's the proactiveness that I'm talking about in prosecution that we need to do. I mean, my philosophy for prosecution is prevention, which is the proactiveness, intervention when appropriate, and then prosecution. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's why I want to run, because I think we need better leadership and we need a prosecutor, not a politician in that office. The stakes are too high. The job's too important. Crime's too violent. Our city's too big.
Totally hear you on that one, David. And I want to bring up, because you mentioned how, Chesapeake doesn't need a politician. They need an experienced prosecutor. And as I mentioned earlier, you are the Republican candidate, just like your opponent Matt Hamill is the Democratic candidate. Now, this had really had a story before election season occurred, because last year, November, and I mentioned it here on the show, Matt Hamill at the time was a registered Republican. He left the Chesapeake GOP. Now he's running as a Democrat, and so it's like you have that separate story of sharing in he's speaking on the issues that happen or that is going on in the Chesapeake GOP. And for those who are residents, who are voters, I would say, yeah, you can pay attention, and not pay attention, but you can, read about that, but you still need to pay attention at, exactly, okay, what has the record been in the past? Like, as you had mentioned earlier, what has his record been as a Chesapeake Commonwealth attorney? So it's like, you don't want to make it so partisan. So I want to ask you this. Critics argue that politics often interfere with the Commonwealth Attorney's office. Now, how can you guarantee you won't put party loyalty above justice?
Because I never have. And I have the record and the experience to show that. And here's the thing. Our duty is to justice, to no political party. And I'm glad you asked about the political party, because it is inherently a professional job. These constitutional positions are professional jobs. They're not part-time jobs like city council or the General Assembly. There are no other backstops. If you don't like your city council person, call another one. If you don't like your delegate, you got plenty other to call. If you don't like your congressperson, you can call other ones, But if you don't like your Commonwealth's attorney, there's nobody to call. If you don't like your commissioner of revenue, there's nobody else to call. That's why it's so important to have the right person with the right experience. Mm-hmm. So politics play no real part in prosecution. If you're a Republican and you break the law, I'm prosecuting you. I don't care how high up in the Republican Party you are. I don't care anything. You break the law, you're getting prosecuted. If you're a Democrat, you're getting prosecuted. If you're a Republican victim, it doesn't matter. We don't ask those questions. We say, you're a victim, you're a defendant. What do the facts say? It's not a political thing. Now, it does get political when you start talking about policies. Mm-hmm. You talk about like cash bail, or you talk about progressive prosecution. I don't believe in that stuff. I believe that we should keep cash bail, and I'll explain that to you. I don't think cash bail is the problem. I think inexperienced and maybe lazy prosecutors are the problem. I'm not a fan of taking away tools out of our toolkit. In Virginia, we have PR bonds. That means you get bail without having to put up money. We have no bail. And then we also have cash bail. But you have to have people that understand how the bail system works. If you're worth $100 million, I don't know if you are, maybe you are, but if you are worth $100 million and you get a $10,000 secured bond.
If I was worth $100 million, do you really think no, I'm joking.
You might be. This might be your fun stuff,
No, I'm messing with you, man. I'm messing with you.
But what I'm saying is that if you're worth $100 million, a $10,000 bond is nothing to you. But if you're worth $100, that's effectively no bond. And those are things that prosecutors need to think about when they're asking for bond. It's not, well, this is a B&E, it's $10,000 for everybody. You got to take in all the factors. That's what the statute requires. So that's why I'm not in favor of getting rid of cash bail, which, historically Democrats are. It's because it's not a problem with the system. It's a problem with the application of the system. And that's why you need knowledgeable prosecutors to understand how to do it. As far as progressive prosecution, where you're trying to not prosecute certain crimes, I'm not a legislator. Prosecution is not policy making. It's not legislation. And if the General Assembly wants to criminalize things, I don't get to say I'm not doing it ever because I disagree with it. That's not what our job is. And that's what I mean. That's why the politics has to stay out of it. But certain politics do matter. There's some things that that I would advocate for in Richmond. If I thought they were bad policies for Chesapeake safety, I would be in Richmond advocating for or against those. That's when the politics come in,
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not in favor of getting rid of mandatory minimums. I think that's the fairest way to apply anything, because everybody, no matter their background, gets the same punishment, and that's a Republican issue as far as mandatory minimums. I think if you use a firearm unlawfully when you're robbing somebody, you should get a mandatory minimum sentence because that's what the General Assembly says. So that's kind of how I feel with politics. Now, the one thing I'll say about switching parties, I thought I was going to have a primary. I thought I was going to have a Republican primary with my opponent because he was a Republican. He ran for city council as a Republican. He ran the first time as a Republican. So my challenging of him isn't because he's a Democrat. My challenging of him is because I don't think he's doing a good job. I think he's made too many mistakes. I think he's incredibly soft on crime. And, being tough on crime doesn't mean you throw people's rights away or that you throw the book at everybody. It just means you sentence people appropriately and you hold people accountable. And I don't think he's been doing that. So this idea that I'm running against him because now he's a Democrat, when I was going to run, I thought he was a Republican. I thought we were going to have a primary, and then he switched parties. And when he left the Republican Party, he didn't say he was joining the Democratic Party. I mean, in October, he was at all through 2024, he was at the Republican Party meetings. So that's just kind of the disingenuousness of it for me, is I feel like he switched parties for kind of self-preservation. And he actually kind of admitted that on your podcast. I listened to it. He said, well, you got to be on a sample ballot. And he says, and I believe in the 80% rule. And I think that's telling to me because, yeah, I do think people agree 80% of the time, but that other 20% is what makes you a Republican or a Democrat. So, what 20% don't you disagree with, and that's the disingenuousness I see. And if you're willing to do that, to me, I believe it means you are more worried about keeping the job than actually doing the job. And I will always be about doing the job. If that gets me unelected, I'm okay with that. I'll do something else. I'm a good enough lawyer. I'll work somewhere else, but I will always be concerned with doing the job, not keeping the job.
David, if you don't mind bringing up a couple of examples, you mentioned, the tough on crime and soft on crime. Now, being a lifelong Chesapeake resident, I have always felt safe in the city of Chesapeake. And I think a lot of folks that move into the city of Chesapeake feel the same way. If you compare it to some of the other cities within the Hampton Roads area, that's no shade at your home city, man. That's no shade at your
yeah. I mean, yeah. I still love Portsmouth. Don't be talking bad about Portsmouth.
No, that was no pun. That was no pun intended. I saw you laughing. I'm like, wait, why is it? Oh, I'm like, oh, he did say something. No, nothing against P-Town, man. Nothing against Portsmouth, but seriously, like in other,
right? My family, I got family that still lives there. All right.
Oh, look, I always say this: crime is everywhere. Portsmouth has rich history, just as Chesapeake has rich history, just as Virginia Beach, in any other city. But if you have to tally it up from the 7 cities, Chesapeake has always been primarily a safe city. So if you can, just for our listeners to have a more understanding of, because we hear, and I'm not calling it a talking point, but we hear the short version of like, hey, soft on crime, tough on crime. What is an example of, say a tough on crime prosecutor from a soft on crime prosecutor or Commonwealth attorney?
Well, I'll give you a good example. I mean, one example is the case that he broke news on, where a year ago his office felt it was appropriate to give somebody 100 hours of community service in an armed carjacking, and I personally don't think that's appropriate. I think if you're going to carjack someone, you need more than 100 hours of community service. I mean, community service is what you give college kids when they're drinking underage, I mean, not carjackers,
I mean, I wouldn't know about that, David, because I was such an angel. I was such an angel, in college, but
and those are things that I think are inappropriate. Another thing, for example, is that there was a case where a guy took a M1 Grand and took a 30-06 round straight through the window of the Bearcat, the SWAT vehicle. And I mean, it would have hit if that blast didn't work like it was supposed to, it would have killed that officer, And then he took another round off, and in that case, that guy, from what people have told me, he ended up having like 500 or 600 guns in his house, and takes a shot at a police officer. He's charged with attempted capital murder, all this other stuff, and they end up null processing quite a few of them, and to give the guy 5 years. I mean, I think if you're going to try to kill somebody and take a 30-06 and shoot it through a windshield of a vehicle, no matter what vehicle, I think you need more than 5 years for that case. And that's why I say, like, yeah, people I think have felt safe in Chesapeake, but it's soft on crimes policies like that will make us less safe very soon, because it doesn't take that long to do so. And here's some stats. In his first year in office, robberies went up 26% or 23%, over 20%. And then in his second year in office, it went up another 10%. And that's stuff people don't realize, but that's the facts. And the other thing is, I mean, you see the news. I mean, violence is happening in Chesapeake more and more regularly. Like every time you look at the news, seems like something is happening in Chesapeake. And I don't think that's by accident. I think that is by certain policies and certain soft on crime things that are happening. And, that's the thing that we have to do as prosecutors. And when you've done it as long as I have, you're able to separate the violent offenders and the repeat offenders from the people that don't necessarily need the book thrown at them. Like I said, intervention is a thing. Drug court is great. Mental health court is great. Trying to find alternative sentences for nonviolent offenders is I'm all for that. But for the violent offenders, the carjackers, the people trying to kill police officers, you got to punish them. You just have to. They have to be held accountable.
So, David, and you had mentioned the carjacking case. Now, I did want to bring this up because this was brought up by your opponent Matt Hamill on my show. That actually it made it to our local paper, the Virginia Pilot, and basically Matt Hamill was accusing you of interfering in that carjacking case. So the order turning the case over, eventually turned it to a new Commonwealth Attorney's office, but it was a 5-page motion claims that his opponent, that would be yourself, in November election former, hold on, I'm making sure, okay, that you showed up unannounced at a home of the victim in a carjacking incident to discuss the case, then posted a video on your campaign Facebook page in which Hamill criticized anything you want to what's your response on that? Because it did make the local local paper, and again, that was an accusation brought up from your opponent Matt Hamill. So anything you would like to share with our audience about that?
Yeah, and I'll keep it brief because, quite frankly, it's just politics as usual from the politician. That's what politicians do. I wouldn't do that. But here's the thing. I've knocked on thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. I showed you my walk app today about how many doors I've knocked, which is why I was glad I saw you today, because I could show you that.
that was not planned, by the way, y'all. That was not planned at all.
But I saw you. I was like, hey, come over here. I got to show you this, are you there? I think I lost.
Yeah, I'm sitting. I'm still.
Okay. But yeah, so I'm knocking on thousands of doors because I want to talk to everybody. I want to talk to everybody. And I do talk to everybody. And I didn't know who that lady was from anybody. And she just told me about the case. And I thought it was unacceptable. And as a citizen, I'm allowed to think that's unacceptable. But here's what happens sometimes, I think, with politicians is when they get caught making a mistake, I mean, nobody thinks 100 hours of community service for carjacking is appropriate, or at least they shouldn't. And if they do, I would never vote for that person. And they try to deflect. And I think that's what this was. I think it's interesting that he talked about this case on your podcast before the article even came out. That's what politicians do. They just try to create a story because he wants something negative to say about me. And that's what politicians do. But listen, I'm going to keep knocking. I'm going to knock thousands and thousands of more doors to do. I don't campaign like him. And maybe it's a waste of time. My understanding is that he does what's called lit dropping. Just walks to your door, throws a flyer down. I don't want to do that. I've already said that I want to be accessible to people that elect me and people that don't elect me. I want to be able to talk to you because I don't learn anything by lit dropping, but I learn lots of things about our community when I door knock. I want people to talk to me. If they're unhappy and when I'm elected, I want them to tell me that, because if you live in a bubble, you're never going to be better. And that's some of the things that he has said on the campaign trail. He's like, well, I haven't seen anybody in the media complain about cases. Well, I'm sorry, but if you don't have a contact at Wavy TV 10, I think your opinion matters. If you don't have a sidewalk, which is half the city in Chesapeake, I think your opinion matters, and I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to keep doing that no matter what he tries to say about my door knocking. And that's how I'm going to run this office. I am going to be accessible. And that leads me to how I'm going to be accessible. Do you know in South Norfolk, if you're trying to come to the Commonwealth Attorney's office, It's an hour round trip if you got to take the bus. That's a lot of time to talk to somebody that you elected.
Yeah.
You know, if you live in Western Branch, it could take you an hour to get to Great Bridge just based on traffic. I want to be able to have people in libraries maybe once a week, once a month, so that they can come and say, hey, I don't have to take an hour-long round trip to go talk to these people. I can go to the library, I can go to Russell Memorial or anything and talk to these people. That's how you learn. That's what interaction is. That's what community partnership is. And that's what I'm going to bring. And I think that's what go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say that's exactly what it was gonna lead me to a question on asking, how would you bridge that gap between the community and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office? Because again, I speak on a lot. Residents in Chesapeake, not everybody knows exactly who serves what position. They don't know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have to direct people how to get to our local registrar's office. And I mean, it's just it's little things that for me, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, I was one of those folks. But you have to know that you have a local government website. Just browse, just when you have free time. We live in a tech savvy world where everybody's on their computer, tablet, laptop. You have to have an understanding and just know. And then as you mentioned, you don't want to be a person that drops pamphlets, because I mean, what most of the time happens to pamphlet droppers, it's going to get tossed in the trash, and people are either going to ignore it or take the time to read it. So I do think it's important, just to agree with you on that. I do think it's important to build that relationship with the community, so that people can feel more they want to feel welcome. For one, they want to feel like, hey, look, they're coming to me because we elected him. You're here to serve, and we have to know what's happening within our city.
How many times I've knocked the door in the last several months, and people are like, you know what? Nobody has ever knocked my door running for office. We get mailers, we get text messages. They're like, nobody's ever knocked my door. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm not a good politician, but I'm going to keep knocking doors. And some people think I'm wasting my time, but I don't think I'm wasting time. And that whole thing about community, even when people say they're not going to vote for me, like, I tell them how to vote. I think we are better off when people participate. And if you don't vote for me, I'm fine with that. I want you to vote for me, but if you don't, I still want you to vote. I want everybody to vote. I want everybody to get involved. And I think it's especially important for Commonwealth's attorneys to be accessible to their community, because I think it helps prevent crime, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens when you come to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office? You're either a victim or you're a defendant. And if you're a victim, usually it's probably the most impactful thing that's ever happened in your life. And if we're a stranger to you, how are you going to be that cooperative with us? Like, we want people to tell us about the most heart-wrenching thing that's ever happened to them, whether it be they're the victim of a robbery or a victim of a break-in and entering or anything like that. And we expect them to come and tell us what happened in front of a courtroom of strangers, and the guy asking them a question is a stranger. I don't think that's fair to victims. I just don't think it is. And I try to, when I was a prosecutor, I tried to have as much communication as possible, because, that helps everybody. If people have more buy-in and more trust in the office because they know them, they're going to be more willing to participate. I can't tell you how many times growing up where I grew up, nobody talked to the police. Nobody talked to prosecutors because we didn't know them. And then outreach happens and you build that trust, and then people are more willing to talk to you. But they're not going to talk to you if they don't know you and they don't trust you. And that's why you got to do this outreach, because it makes people participate more. And if they participate more, then you can hold more people accountable, because you have good witnesses. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to show up at election time. I want to show up all the time, because I think that's what's needed and that's what's demanded. And that's the thing too. I tell prosecutors all the time. And I tell police officers this. I said, in the line of work we're at, it's very easy to kind of get in a rut and go through the motions. I said, but when you get to that point, you got to quit. You got to find something out to do, because every single case you have, and I've done thousands of them, but every one of them that I've done, to the people, the victim and the defendant, it was the most important thing that was happening in their life at that time. And we need to treat each case that way. And if we don't treat it that way, and we treat it as a run-of-the-mill, oh, this is another thing going through the motions, you got to leave, because then you're not doing justice. And I'm honest with people that I've supervised about that. If I see you kind of, going through the motions, we're not doing that. It's too important, and it's too important to all the parties involved in prosecution. This is a different job than anything else. The stakes are high, emotions are high, and you got to take it serious, and you got to take everyone serious. And that's the way I prosecute. And if I ever get outside of that thought, I'll do something else, because I understand what it means to be a prosecutor and why you have to be that way.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more on that. stance as far as, let's see, making it very comfortable for folks that enter into a courtroom, because knock on wood, very grateful. Never had to enter into a courtroom. The only time I had to enter is because when I think when I first had got my license to drive, every teenager,
everybody has to do
that.
And
look, hell, I was nervous then. I'm like, oh God, that's a judge. Like, I mean, and just because it maybe it's just, it's the feeling for one, hey, I'm an African American male, so it does give you just, the creeps of, being in a courtroom, but also in general, it's a courtroom. Like there was a time when I was nervous of either if I was talking with a police officer, I was a little nervous, but now I'm more than comfortable, and that's great. Is with the thanks of, for one, great support from our law enforcement, and on top of that too, it does help having very, very, very close friends that work in law enforcement too, and family that work in law enforcement. But you're absolutely right. It's just the little things that folks get very anxious. Just, oh man, I'm here, I'm there, and yeah. So that was a little funny story, because when I first got in there and I was just getting my license, I'm like, Your Honor, I am innocent.
It's like, sir, you're just getting your license, all right? You're
okay. Okay. I object. Wait, who are you? Oh, I'm sorry. Like, I watch too much Law and Order, man. I'm sorry.
You asked for a jury to get your license. You're like, I want my jury, my peers to give me this license. But that's the thing, because lawyers get nervous too, and I'm like, if lawyers are getting nervous, how do you think the person who doesn't ever go to court feels? So,
Absolutely. David, I want to ask. I want to discuss a little more within your campaign and your platform. What's your stance on alternative to, say, incarceration, such as diversion programs, drug courts, and restorative justice initiative? What's your take on, or your stance on some of those? I think we might we've hit it a little earlier, but if you don't mind, still mentioning that.
Alternative programming is necessary, but what we have to do is we have to make sure we can't just do alternative sentencing just for the sake of saying we're doing it. We need to make sure it works. Like drug court works, mental health court works, but what we always need to do, and what I am going to be as Commonwealth attorney, is I'm going to be very data driven. We have to understand that if something isn't working, we don't just keep doing it. You have to change it. If certain policies don't work, you got to be willing to change it, because that's just the way life is. Sometimes you have a great idea, you think it's going to work, but you don't just keep doing it because you're like, well, I don't want my idea to be wrong. If it's wrong, it's wrong. So things like drug court, things like mental health court, those are, when I shouldn't say drug court anymore, it's rehabilitation court or recovery court now. But those are things that work, and those are things that we need to use, because what people forget is the real reality is that I would say 99% of the time, you're not getting life in prison. So you are going to get out. So one of the things that I want to make sure we are doing is not just handing down sentences. We are also knowledgeable about what programming there is, because what we all want to do is we want people to be successful when they're done with their probation or their sentence or anything like that. And you got to, we don't want them to waste time if they get a jail sentence. We want them to do something. We want them to be productive. I believe the best way to help victims is to make them not victims in the first place. Yes, there's an idea of making victims whole. I agree with that. But once the victimization happens, that's always with them. You can never make them whole. So the best way to help victims is to make them not victims in the first place. And that's how drug courts, recovery courts, mental health courts, programming while incarcerated helps. That leads me to one of the things I did when I was on the board of Department of Juvenile Justice. Was one of the first things we did when I was on the board was I was like, okay, we have these kids here, and they are kids, they're minors. And what are we teaching them? Because at some point they're going to get out, and we want them to be productive, but they have to have skills to be productive. So I was like, what do we have here? They're like, we got welding. I'm like, well, welding's great, but I don't care how many classes you give me. I'm not going to be a welder. I'll be awful at it. I just know it, So you have to have more than just welding. And now they have HVAC. They have framing. Now they also have, I didn't even know till they got this program in the facility. You have to have a license or a certification to drive a forklift. They have simulators so that they can get their certification. And when they get out, they have a great job. But then we went beyond that. Some of these kids, they can't help where they come from, what situation they were born into. But if they're getting released at, say, 20, 21, 19, they might not even know how to sign a lease or open a checking account or sign up for a power bill. We need to show them that. If we have them, we should teach them that. That's why one of the things I was so happy about this past year was at Bon Air, they had or at DJJ, they had at the school they had the highest graduation rate that they've ever had, because that's what we need to be doing. And that's what we should do for everybody. Let's not waste time while we're in there. You can be held accountable and be sentenced to incarceration if you're an adult, but let's figure out programming that would be beneficial to that person while they're there, because they are available, and let's order them to do those things too, so that when they get out, they don't reoffend. I believe that everybody wants to be successful. You know, I was a public defender a long time, and I think most people, you know, there's some people that might just be career criminals, but for the most part, I think people want to be law-abiding citizens. And if we can do something to make them that when they get out after they've been held accountable, I'm all for it. Let's do that. That's good for everybody. And I want to do that. And I will continuously search for programming to help people do that.
So David, I want to bring this up too, because this happens really, I think this is an issue that occurs not just in a local area in the, you know, in the city of Chesapeake, but I think this happens abroad across the nation, is you know, jails being overcrowded. Now, you mentioned about being, you know, extending sentences for those who, you know, like will do a very horrendous crime to, you know, to extend a longer sentence. But with, say, a jail overcrowding, do you happen to, you know, to ease the burden, how would you say, or will you push a reform to kind of ease that? Or like, what's your take on that, or how to prevent an issue of overcrowding jails?
So that's why, from a prosecution standpoint, you know, you know, you have all this General Assembly stuff you could do or whatever, but from a prosecution standpoint, I think that's why it's so important to have well-trained and experienced prosecutors, and a head prosecutor that has done this and is able to train up younger prosecutors and tell them how to identify, you know, what's a case where we could divert, what's a case we can't divert. So, for example, like what a lot of people may not realize, but if you've done this long enough, if you've been in law enforcement, some of the substance abuse issues that we see happen because people are self-medicating for mental health issues, right? They might not have the resources to get the mental health medication that they need, and then they self-medicate with some other kind of drug. So we need to identify those people, and we need to have open dialogues with defense attorneys, because we can't talk to the defendant. We can't talk to the person that's charged. But if we have open dialogue and really talk with defense attorneys and say, all right, is this somebody that's eligible for, you know, outreach or for diversion? Let's do that. But you got to be knowledgeable to identify it. And that's what I'm good at. And that's what I will teach a team of prosecutors to do. The other thing too is we also need to make sure when we're giving people probation, here's, I think, a problem that happens in jails, right? And, you know, you'll see it all the time. You know, people come into jail and then they get on their medication for mental health issues and they're doing fine. But then they get out and they don't have an ability to get their medication. So then when they're off their medication, they go back to drug use, self-medicating or whatever. And it's just endless cycle. But I think Chesapeake is doing a really good job with their Chesapeake Care Center, with CIBH, to mobile mental health clinics, to really try to do that. And that's what I think, you know, we can partner with the jail and talk to people and like have open dialogue saying, hey, let's make sure when this person gets released that he gets his medicine when he's released, you know, like, because that helps with the mental health thing. But that's what comes with knowledgeable experience, to be able to identify that, you know, how can we help people not reoffend, and how can we keep people in an environment where they are steady on their medication. You know, and also too, you know, that's another thing that's you see a lot with overdoses, and they go to jail and they get clean, and then they come out and they use what they used to use, but their body's not accustomed to it anymore. You overdose, you know, and those are just things you need to know about, and you don't know about if you haven't experienced it or seen it. And, you know, I saw it all the time growing up, or seen it in this job as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney. You know, I think being a defense attorney at the public defender's office really opened my eyes to a lot of things that some career prosecutors don't see. You know, spending that time in jail.
And I would assume being a public defender too, that also is another avenue that builds trust with community, because I mean, you're here to help, you know, defend those in the from the public, and I think that's a very you mentioned how throughout your career as an attorney, that was a key part that you appreciated. And, you know, here we're discussing like the importance of, you know, community relations, and so it kind of ties hand in hand, because I'm a stickler of people being involved in the community, right? So I run a nonprofit. I'm very involved with community service work here in the Hampton Roads area. And you mentioned it earlier. It sucks that we live in a world where there are such thing as folks that are in office. I'm not saying that's I'm not speaking of anybody's name or anything like that, but I'm just saying we exist where there are folks that are elected officials that people don't know until election day. And it's like, whoa, where have you been? Where was the activity? Where was the, we don't have an understanding. I mean, I mentioned when we had primaries here, we had extremely low turnout in primaries. But I mean, that wasn't that, it's common to have lower than your general election, but still it was very, very, very low. And I think that has something to also do with not being involved in the community. People also are in it's trouble. We're in troubling times right now. Just it's a lot happening. So a lot of folks are a bit, want to be stay in the office when it comes to politics. And that's why earlier I'd mentioned about how, with the role as Commonwealth attorney, how really it's important to, not pay attention at the partisan side of things, because it's like we have but a handful of elected positions that is really a nonpartisan position. Like I've always said, anything law related should not be partisan. I understand if it's when you go to on council and in mayoral seat, I understand that, and I know a lot of them are really, really great individuals. But I think when it comes to law, it really shouldn't be a partisan thing when it comes to law, because hey, Chesapeake is the second largest city population wise in the state. So we have a lot of people living here with a lot of different political perspectives. So it's been it's very beneficial. And I guess that will lead me to my next question. David, how big is, and you probably hit it earlier, but the importance of fairness in law. Again, voters will always have their criticism on, hey, look, elected officials, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. But really, how important is it? Just, I don't mind you, talking about it again. How important is just that fairness? Say you are, you win the election, you are Commonwealth attorney. How important is it for you to really play the role as a fairness, Commonwealth attorney for the city, and not just for, one political side than the other?
Well, fairness and justice is the benchmark for prosecutors. I mean, that is your job, and so it's interesting. And like I talked about kind of that hat when you're a defense attorney, but when you're a prosecutor, you have duties to everyone. You have a duty of fairness to the defendant. You have a duty to your community. You have a duty to the victim. You have a duty to everybody, and your duty is to do justice. And if you are not doing justice, you are not doing your job, and that, I mean, it is the absolute most important thing. It doesn't matter what your party is. It doesn't matter who your mom is, who your daddy is. None of that matters. What matters is, are you doing the right thing every single time? Are you doing the fair thing every single time? And if you are not, you are failing at your job. And that will always be the number one thing that I will focus on. That will be the first question I ever ask. If anybody comes to me for anything, well, what is the just thing to do? Not what would the media say? Not who does this person know? That doesn't matter. What matters is justice. And that's what I will always do, because I mean, that's my calling. I'm a prosecutor. But I did want to say one thing. This is why I'm not a politician. All these politicians will be mad. They're like, stay on message. But I wanted to say something about primaries. I tell my friends all the time, they're the friends that just vote in November, and they're always like, why are we just stuck with these two people? I'm like, well, did you vote in the primary? No. I'm like, well, I'm like, you don't vote when we're picking these two people, and then you complain about who they are. I'm like, I wish so many more people would participate in primaries, because everybody who doesn't vote in a primary seems like half the time they're like, well, I don't like either one of them. I'm like, well, why didn't you vote in the primary? You could have voted for the guy you like. There's always people in primaries, So, but that's my tangent. But I did want to go back to, talking about trying times. And one of the things that I want to do is, when I was in juvenile court, I am a big believer that juvenile court is one of the most important courts that we are in. And the reason why I say that is because that is oftentimes people who are charged their first time in the system. And that's our first shot to really do something to make their life better and to get them off that path. That's why I will make sure that my juvenile team is full of very experienced prosecutors, because I think it's that important. People don't realize this. Sometimes in the juvenile system, kids get brought in and that's the first time they're ever diagnosed with a mental health issue, or that's the first time traumatic events that have happened in their life have ever happened. And that's why I want to make sure I have some of the most experienced people there, because it's the first time that these people are in contact with law enforcement. I want them to be with the most experienced people to make sure we get the appropriate adjudications for them to ensure that they don't reoffend later.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Look, David, I have about a few minutes left, man. I want to have some fun here. So
yeah,
being an attorney, and this may be a corny question, but are you a partake in like the Law and Orders and the Chicago law, like any law programs? Was that you when you were kind of starting up in the world of justice, the world of law? Were you into like a lot of law programs or reality programs?
Yeah, I still watch them. And my favorite law show, my dad passed away in 2019, but we loved watching Boston Legal. And even when we weren't together, we'd watch it and we'd talk about Boston Legal. But yeah, I like legal shows. It's hard for me to watch.
Was that with Shatner? Was that William Shatner's?
Yeah.
Yep. I remember.
The guy who was in the Blacklist. What was his name?
Oh, damn. Continue talking. I'm gonna look him up.
Yeah, the guy who was in the Blacklist. He was also in Boston Legal.
Very true.
But it is. There's certain family members, and I won't say who, that it's hard for me to watch those shows with, because they want to know, does this really happen? And I'm like, I can't watch this show and have somebody ask me if this really happens 27 times in the episode. So that's the only hard part about watching legal shows when you're a lawyer, because people are like, did that really happen? Could that happen? I'm like, I don't know.
Same. My stepfather, he's a retired firefighter, and watching a lot of these, if you're watching movies or anything, and there's like fire scenes, and he's just the expression on his face is always priceless, because he's just like, oh my God, going in a burning building without a helmet, Hollywood, like that's like his opinion. It's quite comical. The gentleman's name was James Spader.
That's it. Yeah.
James Spader. And for those who are watching, y'all, David, I put up your site just for those who want to get to know you more. Again, this is early voting, so it will be over. Early voting will be over, at least in Virginia, until October 24th. But election day is November 4th, y'all. So again, within your local areas, you probably have early voting that started now or about to start very soon. But David, how can folks continue to keep up with you?
Well, they can go to davidmick.com. There's ways you can communicate with me there. You can also search David Mick for Commonwealth's Attorney on Facebook. And my email is mickforcommonwealth@gmail.com. And as you can see, the number one thing there is dedicated to fairness. That's where we got to start. That's where everything starts. And we will always be a fair prosecutor's office. We'll be stern but fair always.
Couldn't agree with you more, sir. And look, honor to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time out your busy schedule. And as I mentioned to all of our guests here, please don't be a stranger. You're always welcome. You always have an opportunity here to share, whether if it's something that's passionate that you want to speak on. Hey, you always have a seat here, my friend. But look, don't go anywhere. Want to chop it up with you just for a couple minutes. But again, I thank you so much for talking here on the Arrington Gavin Show. So you take care and best of luck on your campaign.
Hey, thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, my friends. Well, look, I hope you enjoyed yet another great conversation here on the Arrington Gavin Show. Be sure to continue to tune into the Arrington Gavin Show weeknights, available on all digital and streaming platforms. Look, get out there and vote. Early voting is now. It's starting. So get out there and vote. That is your voice. Peace and blessings, y'all. Y'all stay safe and stay informed. I'm out.
That's it for tonight on the Arrington Gavin Show. Thanks for tapping in and keeping the conversation alive. Don't forget, stay connected with us on all platforms. Follow at Arrington Gavin on Instagram, Blue Sky, and X, and subscribe to the official Substack for exclusive takes and deep dives you won't get anywhere else. We're here every weeknight, same time, same energy, same real talk. Until next time, stay bold, stay sharp, and stay true. That's what we do on the Arrington Gavin Show. Peace.